All right. It's the last update of the POWERNERD record. So here we are. What is the date now? I think it's it's got to be delivered by the 18th, and it's Saturday now. So I don't know what day it is. I'm exceptionally tired. This will be a longer video. It's the last one for POWERNERD. By the next update that I do, this record will be out of my hands. And I have a lot to say about it. I said on numerous occasions that the nature of a record reveals itself at the end of the process, and this is no exception. I guess the best way to start this would be to say, if you've ever made a record, you will probably, or any creative endeavor, you will relate to the idea that at the very end, you just have to let it go. And keeping in mind the idea that if it was perfect, there'd be no need to make any more records. You just have to allow yourself to be okay with the fact that it's an accurate reflection of where you were at while you're recording it. I was up till 7 a.m. yesterday. I don't like being up late. I like going to bed early and waking up early. I had an extension on the record prior, and that allowed me to take some time off and work on the moth and then jump back into it. And it's a new studio, it's new speakers, it's a new system. I've struggled with every aspect of it's new, like new vocal microphones, new guitar sounds, new computer, new room. Like I say, the learning curve for this record has been phenomenal. I wrote down a couple of thoughts. Yeah, first off is it's 10:40 p.m. now, and I have to have this delivered to the mastering by tomorrow morning at 9, and I've done 2 songs of exports right now, so there's still lots to do. So, what I wrote down is capturing a moment requires acknowledgement of what it is versus what it isn't. When you think about making a perfect statement, what does that entail? What does the idea of a perfect statement entail? Well, I think you can look at it from 2 points of view. One can be a perfect statement would be something that AI would do. You can argue about the nature of the art, but what I'm meaning more by perfection is the ability to articulate realism or intricacies. If we're viewing it from that lens, then it's a fool's game to try and make something perfect as a human being, because the nature of the species and our value in the face of machine learning and things such as this, I think the value of being a human artist is the fact that you are who you are, and that is fundamentally imperfect. For many years I'd struggled with the idea of allowing myself to commit to the nature of the music, because I've often thought that when it strikes properly, which it does every now and then, it has a type of power that is really needing to be handled carefully, in my opinion. And even going into this phase here where I've built a studio, and POWERNERD is like this beginning of this process, and it's a way for me to figure out the studio and the gear and where I'm at, and all these things. And like I said in the last interview, or the last update, it started with the intent of it being something reasonably simple, and it just snowballed into what it was meaning to be from the beginning, which was honestly an audio journal about the process of loss. So in the last week, when it really started to come together and I was able to make an album out of it as opposed to just a selection or collection of songs, I recognized that the trajectory of the songs allowed me to represent the idea of what loss means to me. And I think in a practical way, it starts with a mission statement of just like, okay, we're going to get through this. But then it goes through the stages of loss or guilt or denial or acceptance ultimately. And then it ends in a place where, there's a song about tangible loss, and then there's a song about acceptance, and then the end of the record, it's like a new day. And in that sense, the record is potentially very powerful. Like really powerful. But as a creator, I'm here to say that here I am on the last 2 days of this project. And I get so aware at this stage that there's no more time to change things. You can't change the cymbal sound. You can't change the guitar sound. You can't change, you know what I mean? It's like you've gotten to the point where it is this. And then when I'm able to stand back and look at it, I can hear the things that are wrong with it. But the other night I sat and listened to it with a friend, and we were both just like rocked by it, like heavily. But that's in like it's like in an ideal listening environment. And I because I'm not familiar with the studio, because I'm not familiar with the speakers, I just have my fingers crossed that the mastering engineer can solve any frequencies that I've missed that take away from the experience that I had the other night of just being able to participate in the music without any errant frequencies or concepts or lyrics or compression or anything breaking the fourth wall and then taking me out of the experience of just being in it. And what I guess I was alluding to a second ago, and I'm sorry, I'm very tired. What I was alluding to a few minutes ago about being conflicted about the power of music is I recognize at the end of this record, which I'll say like a broken record is the first of 3, I recognize that if you are speaking and singing about something that is just what you're feeling, it's not like you've got a message. It's not like you have a mission statement and you have some agenda that you're trying to put across, which in the past I had experimented with music, and then combined with the power of it just ended up being problematic because your work becomes a representation of something that is rooted in your ego. But if you're just trying to get past the preachiness and past the hang-ups that you may have about your own technical prowess or lack thereof, or your own voice, and you just say, this is what I felt, for better or for worse, it does, then I recognized, it was 2 days ago, I recognized, I'm like, that's how you can commit to this sort of energy, is if what you're doing is just basically as close to honest about how a period of your life has made you feel as you can be, without trying to say, this is what you should feel, this is what other people should think, this is my opinion. It's like none of that. It's just, ow. The process of loss is, it's I realized that for so many years through the music, I worked so much, and it just became clear as day to me over the past week that it's like, if you're just constantly working, you never have to stop and process loss. You never have to think about it. Or not that you don't have to, but it's a convenient way to not, right? But it catches up, as is evidenced by this stupid record. Like I want to make a bunch of silly songs, just rock songs that allow me to get to know the studio and service a certain aspect of the listening demographic that is familiar with the sound that I do. And I thought, just one of those will be fine. But the process of trying to hide from your own emotions is a fool's game, because it catches up. And I'm not sure if this record has anything to do, I'm not sure if the people who hear this will understand what that intent is, because it's not necessarily overt in the lyrical aspect of it, but I think it comes through despite you. And it just seemed like the imperfections of who we are and who I am is exemplified in the fact that with the time that we have, with the resources that we have, with all the obstacles that are in our way, I can safely say that I couldn't have done more than I have done with this. And then when I listen to it and I hear imperfections, it was a moment of recognition of that is the value of it. I think in the past what I had attempted to do with some of the work was make a caricature of who I felt I wanted to present myself as publicly, like you want to present yourself as being more centered or more zen or more, the ideal of what you feel like you would like your personality to be, through the tendency to be so high strung or neurotic, right? Like, and I think that, and not for any lack of trying, but in the past there'd been a lot of things that I had done where the work was an idealized version of what the creative impulses were. And for this one, the idea of embracing who I'm at and who I am at this stage and what's going on required me to be a little bit more honest about how not centered I am. You know what I mean? How not confident I am about so many things. And this isn't just, I'm not saying this because I'm like saying, I'm a really insecure person. I mean, I'm insecure like the rest of us, but maybe that's the point, is it's all of us, like we're all we're all struggling with similar things to varying degrees. And what I recognize is that by allowing myself to say, you know what, I like this kind of stuff, or, you know, I grew up with that type of music and I kind of like that, and I like motorbikes and AC/DC or whatever it was. Through that surrender, I guess, to being honest with what you are versus what you want people to think you are, it just opened the floodgates of repressed emotions that were all about the process of loss. You know, losing somebody, and on a practical level, on a real technical level, it's what a pain in the ass to be participating in those types of emotions while trying to navigate the recording of a record predominantly on my own. I had help, of course, but much of the work, as always, is just me, right? But in the past, I was able to sort of compartmentalize the emotions and tap into them for parts. Like you'd say, okay, for this section of this song, I know I've got to participate in that difficult memory, so I'll do it, but then I'll compartmentalize it. But this time it just didn't work that way. It was just always there. And so the material became sort of imbued with this period of, like, you know, family dissipating and kids moving away and, like, you know, all these things that are just heavy, right? And I'm sure that everybody here, you know, we all go through this shit. We all go through this shit. And the past 2 years have been spectacularly complicated in that regard, because I think we all held it together during the pandemic to, again, varying degrees, because there was a lot of pressure to, like, make sure that things don't fall flat. You know, you got to generate some money, or you got to do things that are on a practical level require a lack of emotion. And then all of a sudden, when the pandemic or the lockdown or whatever, like, ends, and we're all now like, where the fuck are we? And, you know, it's inflation's crazy, and you know, there's a whole generation of kids that got fucked, and, like, you know, and the older people, and then all these sorts of things that come around. And then amidst it all, and I'm sure there's a lot of you watching this that would relate to this too, you just work. You're like, okay, I'm not gonna let shit fall apart for the family. I'm not gonna let this thing fall apart for the people I work with. I'm gonna, you know, like, stand and deliver. But then as soon as you take your foot off the gas, you're just like, oh my God, man. Like, where am I? Like, holy shit, I'm like 52 now. Like, what? And he's like, the kid's no longer here. Like, what? And, like, they're no longer there. And it's like, and I think the long and short of it is the process of reconciling those traumas and those emotions, and being able to, you have no place to run, you know? Try as you might, like, I'll make a dumb record, but you're like, motherfucker, you got a lot that you haven't sorted out yet. And then a lot of times I often comment to people in my life just like how dumb I feel I am. It's not because I feel like I'm mentally incapacitated. I can do lots of stuff, but in the face of, like, the source and absolute, the truth and nature and the universe and mathematics, and maybe not mathematics, but, you know, just the things that are beyond me. A big part of the process has been just coming to terms with the fact that that's just how it is, man. It's like you can't control the moment ever, but you can represent it. And so what I had hoped to, and I'm not using this as a rationale for any parts of the Power Nerd record that I don't think are perfect. I mean, I feel this way about every record. It's not just this one. This one's a little more tentative just because it's a new studio and new everything, and I'm not confident with what I'm hearing. So I'm hoping. But that being said, if you want to represent perfection and you're not a machine, you have to be present with yourself. Talk about all the AI that goes into phones and everything. You know, I took my glasses off earlier today while I was looking at my phone, and immediately I got a bunch of ads for glasses. And my point being is, if everything about us is known, you know, if your phone knows everything about you, your entire everything, your internet searches, your likes, your dislikes, you know, your combination of good, you know, quality tendencies and maybe not so great tendencies, if everything's known, then wouldn't you think that your energies should best go into accepting yourself? Because if it's already known, what are you going to do? You're going to argue it? You know, you're going to try and make some elaborate artistic statement about being something other than you are, because eventually people just find out, you know, your phone will find out. It's like, it's insane to think in this day and age that the energies that I have should go into creating an identity that is not what I currently am. And so, long story long, as is the case with me, capturing a perfect moment as a human is about recognizing what moments you choose to shine a light on, and not to worry about it being in tune or it being the best possible sounding recording of all times, but more just like you do the best you can and surrender to who you are, and make sure that you surrender to the negative sides as well, not to actualize it, but to just look at it and make peace with it and say, yeah, dude, of course that's part of your trip. Like, what possible benefit would there be to trying to tell yourself you're something that you're not? I mean, I can understand the benefit of doing that publicly, because, you know, it's like you can construct a persona that I'm sure you can use to, you know, monetize on some level. But other than that, which, you know, 30% of people, if you're lucky, will buy, and the rest of them are going to be like, yeah, you're full of shit. Your energy should go into recognizing when a moment that you've experienced in all its brutality and all its ugliness and all its weirdness and all its imperfection is representative of a frame of mind. And then if your creative process goes into identifying it, and then doing your best to be in your truth, as opposed to trying to impart wisdom or dispense benevolence or whatever it is, you know, then it's perfect, because that's just what it is. The moment is always perfect. And it's like a lesson in violence, man, this whole one. And so the process of listening to this record, and I hope it translates, because some songs are just, you know, it's straightforward stuff, right? But what I learned about this period of my life is the emotions come out. no matter how much you try to suppress them, no matter how adept you've become procedurally in compartmentalizing your emotions so you never have to participate in them. Like I say, the way that I have, among the ways that I've done that is I intellectualize it, or I try to make a statement out of it that is rooted in some sort of technical procedure, like making music or building something, right? But eventually I just think your life just like is like, okay, you need to think about this now. I don't even need to think about this. Here it is. Here it is. And so I think the reason I struggle with the lyrics on this one is because there's nothing clever you can say about it. You can't make some I can't make some prose out of it or make some analogy out of it lyrically that you know imparts some sense of like mystery. It's like, no, it's just fucking what it is, man. It's like, just let it out. Just when I got to the second last song, so basically POWERNERD was originally going to end with a song. I haven't named it yet. I got to name it. It was called Self Love, and then it was called Goodbye. I think it might still be called Goodbye. It might be called Buddy. But it was going to end that with that song, but when I got to it, it just fucking blew me apart so much that I was like, oh, dude, like, what is your reason for putting this out? Like, why do you want to leave people with that? You've done that before. You did it with, like, Alien or whatever. It's like at the end with the info dump, it's like consciously, it's like, okay, leave people feeling like that. And at the time, it was because I was hurting and angry, and I'm sure that's still there, but now my reasons for making that are just, I think I was conflicted about it. I was like, I can't just leave it like that. It's like awful. Shit's already hard enough, as opposed to just providing a soundtrack of like despair or something for that last thing. But then it was like, through the process of the recognition that it created a tangible emotional response in me that was mirrored by other people who had heard it. The fact that it had been done, despite my best attempts to suppress it, made me think that there's a lesson there. And the lesson came in that there was another song that I had written that was just, it was like a joke song. And then when I put it at the end, the effect made me think, oh, that's what this record's about. It's the process of loss. You know, and it's like your denial, and then anger, and then depression, and then acceptance, and then at the end it's like, then it's another day. And so what that song ended up doing is it created an experience for me that by the end of it I was like, oh, that helps me understand this process, this last year's process. So just because I overthink, I had spent a bunch of time going, why would you do it? Why would you put music out? Like, I know it's a silly question, you're a musician, right? Why would you do it? And one of my tendencies has always been to take anything that I do that could potentially be viewed as being a good thing to do or a nice thing to do. In a very vague sense, like say you help an old lady across the street. One of my tendencies has always been to not allow myself to recognize that perhaps I did that because it was the right thing to do, and you're not an awful person. And instead, I will view it as like, well, you did that because it's a selfish act. You do these things, you help that old lady across the street because you want to be the person that helps old ladies across the street. Why? Because of the old lady? No. You want to be seen as that person. You know, it's like, and so I would tell myself these things. And it wasn't until a friend said to me recently, they're like, you know, you tend to do that a lot. What if, just hypothetically, what if you did it because it was the right thing to do? So how does that apply to music? Well, I got a good buddy that said to me, if you can do these things and you don't, what a waste. And my response to that was like, well, there's lots of things I can do well, but I choose not to do a lot of them because they don't serve an aim that I have any real interest in pursuing as an identity. So I decided to do the thing that I do after 2 years of thinking that I wasn't. And how do I know that it's a perfect record? Well, first off, it's technically, sonically, vocally, it's not a perfect record by a long stretch. And if I had more time, I would just keep tweaking it. It's not perfect yet. But the reason it's perfect is because in the time that I had, I did the best that I could. And the fact that it exists at all, the fact that this exists at all amidst this period is a commitment to myself, from myself, to the sense that making music is something that is a compulsion but also an obligation to my own mental health. Because had this project not come up the way it did, and had it not been such a motherfucker to pull off in the time that I had, I wouldn't have been thrust unexpectedly into the experience of having to quantify what has happened over the past couple of years. I truly feel that had this record not existed, I would still be unprocessed in this way. And the hope is that other people will relate, because it's not a unique experience. And the way that I can rationalize the effect that it has is in awareness that all the hang-ups I had about lyrics for this one, all the hang-ups I had about melodies and structure and all this stuff never was resolved, so all I could do at the end was just be like, wah! And it's not like elegant, it's not refined conceptually, there's no poetry to it. It's just what it is, man. And the fact that it exists at all makes me feel that I've made the decision to accept who and what I am. And in the same breath, who and what I am evolves. Oh, I gotta get back to this. So I gotta have this done by, it's 11:12 now, I gotta have this done by by 9 a.m. And that gives him one day to kind of get into place, and then I'll have like 5 hours to do any major revisions. I hope that it's not like when he gets it, he's not like the low end's fucked, or the guitars sound reedy, or I can't seem to make it sound good on my system or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, because if that's the case, there's no more time, there's no more time. I took it right to the last minute, and the idea of having faith in things is so contentious nowadays. It's easier to say things that at one time would have been considered horrific than to say, I have faith in the process. But I do. So my view on that is, hindsight is 20/20. I'm going to look at this record as two possible scenarios. One, the effect that it has on me translates through all the problems that I've had with fucking sound on this one. The effect it has on me translates, and then people who clearly have gone through the same shit that I've gone through and am going through will able to hear it and say, yeah, okay, yeah, and it's got a good beat, and it's simple, and it's something I can sing along to, and it's not elegant, and it's not saying that it's centered or enlightened when it isn't. And that is nice to listen to. And then it's perfect. The other scenario is it doesn't work. And the thing that I feel is in there that has, heart and soul goes into, doesn't come across, doesn't sound good on your stereo. Doesn't sound as good as a new Judas Priest record or whatever. And then the intent of it gets lost in all that technical bullshit. And then it becomes this cliff note in the career that acted as a way for me to kind of keep the boat afloat financially for another 6 months, and then bide me some time to work on the Moth and Axolotl and what I want to do in the future. And then in the same way, maybe it's people like, oh, this isn't good, it's a 6 out of 10 or something. Then the lesson that I learned from that is like, well, fucking deal with it. It's just a record, man. You did your best, and in that is the perfection. And in a world rapidly evolving / devolving to the point where perfection will be a commodity that will be instantaneously achieved by anybody with machine learning, your stock and trade is going to be, can you stand in your own truth and not be ashamed of your imperfections? And the answer to that is a begrudging yes. I gotta get back to work. I'm tired, but you know what? 3 more days. So, and then that's it. Next week, if you don't see me next week, I'm just taking some time off. But I'll be back because the Moth and Axolotl are ongoing. I really, truly appreciate the support and paying attention to this stuff. The reason for trying to make these videos is not to try and cast a light on suffering, because that's abhorrent, because everybody fucking suffers. Jesus Christ, that's the nature of it. But more so, the idea behind these updates was to say, an expression of human potential is that of what we create. And if what we create is rooted in an unflinching look at your own truth, then whatever comes from that, in whichever imperfect way, as long as your intent was, to the extent that you're able, to be true to the source, then you've done your job. That's it. And my work is an example of that, but it's no different than yours, and it's no different than your friends, and it's no different than Taylor Swift or Elon Musk or anybody. Everybody's just trying to get through this shit, you know what I mean? So you find someone to love and you just go for it. And Power Nerd is the fact that it got done at all underlines the title of this record. Yeah, it's kicked my ass, man. But they all kick my ass, and you can't dwell in the drama of it like it's some sort of calling card for sympathy. That's disgusting. It's part of it. And this is another way to accept your own artistic nature, is like, yeah, man, it's a part of it. It's dramatic and it's upsetting and it's, you know, it's empowering, and it's there's times where you just want to end it all. There's times where you're on top of the world, and try as I might to not do what I do, it's what I do. I remember I had a buddy at one point, and he said something to me that was really interesting about the level of my vocals on the recordings that I do. It's like, why are your vocals always so quiet in the mix? I said, oh, I just, you know, I don't want to come across as like feeling like self-important or. And he said, well, everybody knows it's you. It's like a kid hiding underneath a blanket in the middle of the room, playing hide and seek and pretending because he can't see other people, they can't see him. And that's true. Okay, I'm hanging up now. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. Thanks for paying attention to Power Nerd. It'll be out in 4 months or so. I hope you like it. I did my best. I think it's really cool. It doesn't sound perfect, but it's really good. Thanks.